All right, Matthew Oliver, House of Oliver, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us for a fabulous opportunity to get informed, stay informed. So important. Hey, if you're already stopping right now to watch this video, then you should also subscribe, like. I heard there's some also other videos that we have that are kind of juicy. That's right. You should watch those too. Really good. But today, I am with the famous, infamous, brilliant, none other than Sheriff Scott Jones. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
I'm going to tell you, I've been like a Scott Jones fan. I feel like a little kid. Like, I'm in awe. You've been larger than life. I'll tell you things. You've stood up, you fought back, you fought for the people, you've represented strong conservative values in a very tough environment. And I've always admired you, appreciated your stance. And so it's super kind of cool that I get to sit in front of you.
Well, thank you. That just means you need to get out more, but thank you. I appreciate that.
That's probably true. I'm in this dark room a lot. It's kind of a big deal because one, you have been sheriff of Sacramento for how long?
Finishing off my 12th year.
12
so
years.
3 terms, 12 years.
That's big.
It's a lot, especially for Sacramento.
Well, and I want to do that, but how long have you been part of the Sacramento Sheriff's Office?
So I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 33 years.
Holy
In fact,
smokes.
as I sit here today, I have the most seniority of any sworn member of the department. So that's how I know it's time to leave.
But I think like there's something to, you've started programs that you've got to see, come full circle and really get developed. And I appreciate that because it wasn't like you were just trying to climb a ladder. You actually poured your heart in, put your life in it, and made it happen. So I really appreciate that.
My entire adult life is contexted by being in the Sheriff's Office. So a lot of my friends, all my adult life experience.
Wow. I just, that's wild to think about, but it's like, now what are you going to do? Wow. So you decided, I've been dealing with bad guys, so I'm going to keep dealing with bad guys, and I'm going to get involved in politics.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you agree that politicians are bad guys. But no, it wasn't always my intention, to be honest with you. I mean, I actually was pretty focused on retirement and just kind of helping Jim Barnes get elected behind me and help continue the trajectory the department's
legacy.
on. Yeah, exactly
Sure.
right. Obviously, it's very important to me. I'm not just going to close the door and leave like a Viking and light the place on fire as I leave.
You were handed a mantle and
That's
a
right.
baton from an amazing sheriff,
Right.
Sheriff John McGinnis, and you've taken things. I think you've done not only a good job, but you've taken it to the next level.
Right.
And really handled it well.
Right. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, that's the way I feel, and I don't want it to go backwards. I don't want it to slide backwards to a time that was, several sheriffs ago.
So if you're watching this and you're in Sac County, they need to vote for
Jim Barnes, for sure.
Jim Barnes,
who I just appointed as my undersheriff. So he's my number 2. I've been relying on him for a long time, but now I'm really relying on him as my number 2 to run the place. So, yeah, it's that's important to me. And frankly, I was pretty focused on retirement. I mean, when you've been in the barrel for 12 years in Sacramento, it's like getting hit in the face with a shovel on a regular basis. It takes its toll.
that doesn't sound fun at all.
It does not. It does not.
Yay.
And
Sheriff Barnes, aren't you ready for this
yeah,
moment?
yeah, exactly. Don't tell him that. Please don't tell him.
Don't watch this video.
No, I just tell him it's great, all the glory. But it's, I was kind of looking forward to my golf game and all the things that retirement after this long and being in the focus and spotlight and, being in the political vortex of Sacramento as a conservative sheriff. And it was really my wife who kind of turned my perspective around when the lines were finally drawn for this Congressional District 3. It was the end of December, and I had, Congressman Doug LaMalfa and Tom McClintock's staff reaching out to me and saying, hey, you have to run. I'm like, no, I'm gonna work on my 13 golf handicap, make it to the senior tour. I've got plans,
You're
man.
not that old. The senior tour, come on now.
Depends on the day.
Okay.
I think it's how you, it's this world we live in now. It's how you feel. It's what age you identify as,
Oh,
right?
okay. Well, yeah, sometimes I just identify as the club. So I've had moments. I'm going to tell you.
So I was kind of going back and forth, and I'm like, I'm really focused on retirement. But then I, kind of started seeing the way the lines were drawn. Placer County was all included. I've lived in Placer County off and on for 20 years. My kids went to school from preschool all the way through college, or all the way through high school before they went off to college. 2 kids still in high school there. So I was intrigued, and I had people that I respect and trust, reaching out to me, telling me I've got to run, and people that remember my run from 2016 and say, we need you back there. And I'm like, I don't know. So I went on a road trip. I fled the state, which for us means going to Reno overnight with my wife. And, I made a few phone calls of people like the sheriffs in the 10 counties and so forth and see what kind of support I can get. And we were driving to dinner somewhere, and it was quiet, and she looks over and says, I think you should run. And so I snapped at her, of course, perfect response. I goes, what are you talking about? But she has never told me that. So she has been great.
Wow.
In 3 terms as sheriff, running for Congress. I tell this story, it was true. I ran for my kids' co-op preschool president because I couldn't stand the long meetings. That was my whole platform, shorter meetings. But she's never told me that. She's been great. She said she'd be with me, and she has. She's been phenomenal.
And I'm still into shorter meetings. I think if you make it all the way, can we shorten
that hasn't left me, for sure. So going back, I snapped and I said, what are you talking about? I said, where is this coming from?
Wow.
Because she's never told me that. And she said, well, look, I know you're looking forward to retirement, but I see the passion you still have, the way things are devolving in this country. I know you still have service left to give, and where this country is right now, I think they need what you've got. I said, geez, man, talk about getting some perspective. And so really that kind of changed my focus from kind of the selfish view of retirement to really that she was right. I do have service left to give. The things that people are concerned about right now, immigration reform. That's why I ran in 16. My officer was killed, and immigration was a mess. It's worse now. So I'm still very passionate about that. Still very personal for me. Public safety. It's not just that people are less safe, and they are, but they feel less safe.
Yeah.
And I can do something about that. That's what I've done my entire life, but certainly the last 12 years as sheriff. And, and of course the economy continues to get worse. And, managing a $500 million budget and 3,000 employees. And not only that, but just having a family, putting a couple kids through college, buying and selling some houses. And, just the experience as you go through life, combined with my experience professionally, like I've never felt before. Last time was a little different. I felt like I had to run to kind of avenge or do something to address Danny Oliver and Mike Davis's murder.
Sure.
This time was a little different. The decision was a little bit more intellectual, but this time I feel like this is exactly where I need to be. Whether I win or lose, this is part of my journey that I have to be on,
Sure.
and I have something to offer this. I'm not trying to make a career out of Congress. I'm trying to bring my career to Congress at this moment in our history.
That's huge. I applaud. One of the main things that you've said that's really sticking with me and echoing with me is the ability to trust those around you, and to be able, I'm married. I have an amazing wife, and I'm so honored to be partnered with someone that I get to do life with,
Right.
that I lean into, that gives me good perspective. So I really applaud that. There's things to it. It's a bittersweet, and you sitting here, because most people know Kevin Kiley's been a friend, not only to me, but to our restaurants, to our businesses, and very supportive. And for me, it's really tough. It's because, you always had Superman hanging out with you, and then Batman sitting across from you. You're like, oh my goodness, you guys are both good guys. You're both superheroes to me and have done great things. If you could say what do you think you bring that defines or separates you from anybody else that is unique to what you're bringing in to running for this position?
Yeah.
And I'll hold it for a second. Last time I asked the question of this, the person that's out over there stared at me intently for like 5 to 10 seconds awkwardly before he answered it. Please don't do that.
I will not.
Weird.
Obviously, if I haven't given that any thought, then I've got no business being here. But first, I want to address the Kevin Kiley issue, and I agree with you. Kevin is a good guy. I've supported him in things. He's supported me in things.
Yeah.
I guess from a voter perspective, this is a good position to be in, right? Most of the time we're trying to choose among candidates that make us throw up in our mouth the least. And so, here from the voters' perspective, we actually have a race where we have 2 people we like.
Two
and
good
so
candidates.
My campaign is not about I'm a great guy, Kevin's a bad guy, and I suspect his is the same except reversed. My campaign, frankly, is about, look, you have 2 people. It's as simple as this. You have a job opening. You're a small business owner. You have a job opening. The job is big. It's Congress, but it's not only Congress. It's Congress at this moment in our history.
Yeah.
So it's a big job. You have 2 candidates. 2 candidates you like. 2 candidates that probably agree on most of the political issues, if not all of them, who are very similar politically speaking in terms of our views. But you have to hire one of them.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you call the other one and say, I hate you. You're dumb for even applying. It's, look, you are going to be great for a job, maybe a different job that I have. And I'm going to keep you on the list if that's all right. But you hire the one that's most qualified. And for me, again, this is not meant to disparage Kevin in any way, but for me, I feel like where we are at this moment in our history with the border, lack of border that's out of control, the public safety issues, the threat, the ominous threat that it wasn't very long ago that we had riots in our cities that were uncontrolled and encouraged by certain politicians. The realization that whether we get prosecuted for defending ourselves or whether bad guys get prosecuted now somehow depends on the politics of your district attorney or your city council or county board of supervisors. We never really realized that before. So what we're realizing is how tenuous our public safety is based on a lot of factors that we never considered before. And that's why I mentioned it's not only people being less safe, and I think clearly that's true, but people feeling less safe. And that is something I've fought for the last 12 years, but certainly dedicated my whole adult life since I was 21 years old to doing. And so, if the issues were different, if the issues were who knows, nuclear proliferation or, trade deals, trade deals with, I had to practice that.
Yeah, that was good.
Trade deals with Sudan, those are things that I don't have expertise in, nor do I have passion in.
Yeah.
But it just so happens, and it's not because they're polling high that I talk about them. I have a history in these things, with the immigration. I have passion for them, and it just happens to coincide exactly with the experience I bring. Not only that, I've been back to D.C. dozens of times since I've been sheriff, developing relationships. Not so much with this administration, to be candid, but I've had
the Trump administration had invited you out, and
Donald Trump invited me out in 2018 as the only law enforcement representative from California to talk about. At that time was Sanctuary State. Now Sanctuary State didn't exist when my officers were killed in Iran last time, but it did come to pass in 2017.
And we've seen the harm. That the Sanctuary State have done. We just had a family.
We just had
brutally
three
taken.
beautiful daughters wiped out by their father and the chaperone that was there to supervise the visit. And I tell you, and I've said this before, the only one thing, you could talk about gun control, and the politicians will, but there's only one thing that could have prevented that, because when he was in jail in Merced County, the ICE served a detainer, which means we know who this guy is. We want to take custody of him, but solely because of sanctuary state laws that exist in this state, they were not only unable to transfer custody of him, they were unable to even contact ICE to let them know he would be getting out, so they could be waiting for him. So that guy got out, and 5 days later killed his 3 daughters and the chaperone. So we can talk about guns. Yeah, if he wasn't able to manufacture that ghost gun, he could have gotten a gun somewhere else, but guess what? He could have also killed him with a knife. So there's only one thing that for sure would have prevented that, and that's the sanctuary state laws that exist. So, but I've been back there. I've spoken to Congress, and I've spoken to congressional subcommittees on that. I've been invited to. I've been on national news beating this drum since 2014.
Yeah.
So part of it's frustrating that I'm still beating this drum, but it's worse now than it was before. So all that to say is I've built relationships unknowingly, really not expecting that I would use them at some point in the future as a member of Congress. But it just so happens I do have relationships. I do maneuver. I go back there quite a bit. I was back there a month or so ago, and met with people that I know, including Leader McCarthy, and the California delegation. I had lunch at their California delegation lunch. I just know people back there and have those relationships. In fact, I don't even take anybody back there. I can navigate my own self back there now. So it's just a matter of stepping into the role and being able to bring what you've got, the baggage you've accumulated over a lifetime, to bear on what is happening right now.
I think one, you clearly delineate, this is who I am. This is what I'm able to bring. And you have the history of seeing the accomplishments. I like it because all I want to do is talk about, whoa, Sheriff Scott Jones, let's talk about cool things that you've done as a sheriff and dealt with. That's what I want to do, but I know we don't have enough time for all that. But you've gone through, the marches that took place, when we had COVID, we had a governor telling you, this is what you're going to do. You're going to arrest people. You're going to lock people up for violating his illegal mandates, his overreach, illegal abuse of the Constitution, and him putting pressure on you, their office putting pressure on you. And then in the midst of that, riots, marches,
all that.
looting, all at your front door.
The irony is you know, when I decided to run again in 2018, I thought, okay, well, I've got the hang of this now. I'm in a groove. You know,
what else could they
there
throw
won't be
at
any
you?
more surprises. And then the pandemic
Fooled
and the
you.
summer of love and 2020 and all that.
Wow.
Yeah, that presented, which, you know, made me kind of think, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I had that experience and was comfortable in that leadership role to be able to deal with those things. I couldn't imagine a brand new sheriff, whoever it was, you know, having to deal with trying to learn that job as well as deal with that. So I'm glad I was there. I think that was my purpose for running again, I guess. But it was very challenging. You know, as far as the mandates, that was an easy one for me. I can't even tell you all the pressure I got from my county health nurse, my county supervisors. Yeah. When I got COVID in 2020 or in November of 2020, and the governor made a comment. Well, even those people that are, you know, referring to me, he basically called me out for getting COVID as if somehow I deserved it.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't enforce mandates. But you know, on day one, I remember sitting on the dais in the county board of supervisors chambers with county supervisors, the health and the county health nurse and all that, when things were very new and people were dying. It was a legitimate deal at that time. We just didn't know. And, you know, it got to me, I was at the end and I said, look, our role is going to be one of education. We're not going to use any law enforcement resources to enforce. At that time, it was the 15 days to flatten the curve. And then it was masked and every other mandate that came out. And you remember there were dozens of them that came out over the last couple of years. There's some still exist. That
very ambiguous.
Very ambiguous. I had to do another press release every time saying, nope, because the media would always glom onto me, right? It's all sexy media. But the reality is, nope,
the bee loves you.
They have an unnatural attraction to me. I don't know. I can't quite figure that out. But, and I had to put out another press release every single time a new one came out saying we're still not going to use any law enforcement. And we never did. We never made one arrest, issued one citation, closed down one business, told people to leave a gym. We never did that one bit. Not one deputy did that at all. You know, meanwhile, I still had to keep our department safe. So we instituted a tremendous amount of safety measures for us, and doing calls outside and training our dispatchers to get pertinent information so the officers would be armed with information before they went there.
Sanitize the handcuffs before you click them on.
Yeah, we did. You know, we cut out visits and volunteers at the jail. I mean, we did almost everything. And you know, they kept, but you know, we've still had hundreds of officers get COVID. That's just, they have to still go to work. That was a very interesting time, and of course, the riots were quite different. My approach
big.
was a little bit different than the city's approach on that.
I think, you know, you kind of were part of the answer for the riots ending in Sacramento. I mean, I know the bee tries to poke you with it, but actually they should be giving you credit where credit's
the reality is, look, part of my job as sheriff is I sit I'm the chair of the Central California Intelligence Center. We're the host agency for the Regional Terrorism Threat Assessment Center. So I'm very tied into national issues as well as national intelligence, and as it relates nationally as well as how it boils down to the macro, the local level. So we knew that they were going to try and do an autonomous zone in Sacramento. So, in fact, most of those folks for
most of you who don't know, that's not like the auto zone. It's not where you get your car fixed.
Yes.
This is where they
Nor is it like the Autopia at Disneyland. That's different.
Totally different. This is a not good thing.
So like Chaz up in Washington, in Seattle, and Portland. And so we knew they were going to do that. And in fact, most of the rioters that night were from out of state. They took a break from their ongoing Portland exploits to come down here to try and establish that here. So we knew that. And so, you know, after the first night, when they tagged the jail and a bunch of other stuff, and by the way, the city's rules of engagement were as long as they aren't starting a fire or physically hurting somebody, then we let them go. Well, there's a lot of things in that margin of letting go, tagging and vandalism and destruction. And it's, you know, and I get it. It's not people. It's just stuff, but it's people stuff. It's businesses. It's livelihoods. You know, you go down J Street today, you're going to see restaurants and stuff that are boarded up that aren't coming back. And one estimate says a third of all restaurants that closed during the pandemic in California aren't coming back.
I'm glad someone gets this. I mean, I've been beating that drum continually. In fact, in Lincoln, where we opened up Oliver's, another restaurant just closed because they don't realize the long term. A lot of these ones, they made it out to realize it's like coming up for a breath of fresh air only to have water dumped on you again, and you're sucking it in and it's drowning you. It is impossible. It's been so difficult.
So after that first night, I had a press conference in front of our jail. And I had pictures of the rioters, which were basically in military gear. They were organized. They were communicative. They had communication.
What about this idea that people said like bricks were being dropped off?
That's absolutely true.
No way.
They also had encrypted communications that we were unable to follow a lot of their communications. And so I had a press conference in front of the jail, and I said, look, I've had one night of this, and I'm done with it. I've been in contact with the National Guard. I'll call them in if I need to, but this is not going to happen in Sacramento County. So realizing I have very little to do with policing downtown, but our jail was downtown, our DA's office was downtown, and so from that point forward, I said, no one's going to put a mark on this jail or the DA's office. In fact, I put Jim Barnes in charge of my ground forces. We shut off the street, and we had a presence there every night there was protests. In fact, the protesters, and we had video, so we were videoing them, they were videoing us, and they'd come by and say, "Oh, those are black uniforms. Keep moving, keep moving."
Yeah, they don't want to mess with you guys.
And they didn't touch the jail or the DA's office after that. And ultimately, they decided it wasn't any fun anymore. That they weren't going to get that free pass, and they left. And so they did not get done. I mean, think about it. Sacramento is the crown jewel of California, right? It's the capital seat. What better place to make a presence? And they were unable to do it. They just decided it wasn't going to be that much fun, and they left. And that's the reason the rioters didn't stay in Sacramento.
What a wild couple of years, and the stories we get to tell.
It was crazy.
So a couple of questions. I know I ask this of almost everybody, and I know the guys watching really want to know some key things, because it's clear I like you. I think you've done a great job, and I'm kind of in awe. It's an awesome moment sitting here talking to you, but I still got to ask the tough questions because I'm Matthew Oliver. I don't know. That didn't sound right. Let's try it again. I'm Matthew. No, it's okay. Felt like I'm Batman all of a sudden. So I want to ask tough questions. One, do you feel that mandating masks for children in schools, that should be something? That's it. I ask everyone that comes in, do you support mandatory mask mandates for children in schools?
I didn't support it in the beginning. I don't support it now. I would never support it. And here's the issue. In the beginning, as I mentioned, we were all kind of scared, right? Mm-hmm. If we were being honest, we didn't know.
I'm with you.
And we didn't know if it was the plague, or we didn't know. And people were dying. But we started learning more about it, right? We learned pretty early on that the aged and people with particular disabilities, obese people, although they never talked about that throughout the course of the campaign. I mean, throughout the course of the pandemic.
Yeah.
We learned that some people were more susceptible, some people were less susceptible. We learned very early on that children were the least susceptible to getting it, transmitting it, and having any effects if they did get it. But so in the beginning, we were doing everything from fogging airplanes between flights. We were deep cleaning restaurant tables.
Yeah.
The problem is, as we learned more about it, we did nothing different. We learned that you didn't get it through contact. It was, aerosol. It was particulate. It was droplet nuclei. You passed it through the air. But yet we still, even
super microscopic.
As early as months ago, you're handed a disinfectant wipe when you get on an airplane, when that's not how you catch it. We learned that children don't. But who are the only people still required to wear masks? Children, and they're the least affected by this. Yeah. But the problem is, we learned early on. We started learning more about it. But we changed nothing. In fact, we just did more of the same thing. And that's how people started losing faith in these unelected bureaucrats that they'd never heard of before, that now were in a position of power to exert that influence and laws.
Yeah, with different positions we never cared about before.
Never
thought
heard
about your local school district board?
I mean, no one ever heard of Dr. Fauci, and he's the highest paid person in the federal government. So
wild.
How you never heard of him, I don't know, but now everybody's heard of him. But nonetheless, as we learn more, and then we started seeing tinkering with the books, right? Cooking the books, figuring out the narrative, the stats, and then we started seeing something we thought we'd never see. You couldn't even say anything opposite of it. Yeah. You couldn't have epidemiologists coming on saying, "Look, this is my lifetime of experience."
Ask questions.
The guy that created the RNA technology that led to the vaccines, they silenced him. I mean, you might think he might have something to say about it, but they silenced him. So all of that led to an absolute lack of trust in places like the CDC and our local and national elected officials. That's going to take a long time for people to get over and to be able to get back. You got to take the politics out of it, and it's just not. So I know that's a long answer to a short question, but specific to your kids' mandate, we knew early on that was not. Look, I had two kids. My daughter missed her senior year of college.
Wow.
But okay, she was probably just happy to get out. But my boys, fortunately, they were in high school. Fortunately, they were in Placer County. So they were still in person most of the year, the 2021 school year, and all year this year, unlike Sacramento. So, but they still had to wear masks, and we know that most communication is expression. It is nonverbal, and you miss all that. The dehumanization, the isolation that they put these kids through. I thank God they weren't middle schoolers or grade schoolers, because that is so critical for their development.
Huge.
And I got to tell you, watching my two boys, they learned nothing. That was a wasted year. They learned nothing. Except how to do a Zoom call from their bed, and pretend that their camera didn't work because they have bad internet. But it was tragic. It was a tragedy from the get-go. But they never changed anything as they learned more. They just silenced the opposing narrative. So. And
would you say the same thing with mandatory vaccines for children? Are you opposed to mandatory vaccines for children?
I'm against mandatory vaccines for anybody. That is your decision. I mean, it's no different than a flu vaccine. This Omicron variant, I mean, on a bad year, the flu kills 60,000 people a year. Normally 30 to 40,000 people a year. So the same logic applies. So next year, the state, the counties, the federal government could say, hey, if you want to go on about your life, guess what? It's a bad flu season. You're going to have to get a flu shot.
You should get,
It seems outrageous to us, but the law is no different. It is the same logic. And so I'm against absolutely any mandatory vaccines to fight any sort of flu, or certainly this pandemic, any of the variants. And we've seen that the vaccine is, I think, and I say I think because I don't know what to. I mean, honestly, I don't know what to believe. But I believe that it probably has a certain efficacy to mitigate the effects, to cut down the virulence of when you get it.
We really don't know.
But we clearly know it doesn't prevent you from getting it. I mean, we see people
coming out to shot number 4 and booster number 2.
Yeah, and people are still getting it.
And they're still getting it.
And they're not being hospitalized. But I don't know if that has to do more with the Omicron being as viruses get less and less virulent, more spreadable, less harmful. If this Omicron is just not that harmful, as we had a very low hospitalization record when Omicron came out, or if it's because the people are vaccinated, who knows? No one knows, because no one is being told the truth. But again, I've never been for mandatory vaccines.
So one of the questions I have, and I've had a lot of people asking this, and they've asked it of Kevin Kiley, so I'm going to ask it of you too. Mm-hmm. I am also going to go on record saying I don't have to give an opinion, because I'm not running for anything. I'm not backing one side or the other. In fact, what most people don't realize is prior to the pandemic, I'm not political. I wasn't political. I still don't feel political. I was asked by somebody who was on here the other day, they said, don't you think you're extreme? And I was like, I'm extreme in fighting for my employees. I'm extreme in fighting for their lives. I'm extreme for fighting for their livelihoods. Yeah. The things that allow us to pursue our dreams and our passions, I guess the Constitution, I like.
Well, you're seeing a lot of that now. When people that never thought they'd be involved in politics, running for everything from school boards to Congress.
And I love it.
So-called normal people, not people that ever considered.
I've never been called normal.
I mean, nobody that would ever consider themselves to be, inclined to politics, but they just can't. I always say that I've never really anticipated running for anything. The things I've run for is this. I either couldn't stomach the alternative, or I got too pissed off about something, like the long meetings in preschool, and it felt like I had to run. I think a lot of people are getting to that threshold, and you're seeing a lot of people that you would never consider in politics running for office. I love it. I think this is a great awakening.
I'm seeing it all there. But it's kind of nice for me because I don't have to make a decision. But you guys are in the tough spot. Right. You're in the hot seat.
Well, put me in, Coach.
And one of the things they ask Kevin Kiley is they and so I want to ask it to you too, is constantly this question of, do you feel that the 2020 election was stolen? Do you feel there was voter fraud, and that the election was stolen, and that Trump should be president now?
So
say thee?
You're not the first person to ask me that question. Okay. That evokes a lot of passion. That issue evokes a lot of passion for folks. And my answer to them is the same as my answer to you is, I have no idea. I don't know. But what I will say is I have enough questions about it that I would like to see answered. And I think that reflects most people. People they're on different ends of the spectrum, whether they think it was stolen or not. But the politically, I could probably give a better answer. But the honest answer is, I have no idea. I saw enough to where, we have found ballots, you have destroyed ballots, you have after-hours shenanigans, you have precincts closing early, you have you have ballots by people that are dead. You have duplicate ballots for the same people.
I know I voted at least 3 times.
Yes, in multiple jurisdictions. So the answer is I don't know, but
Sure.
I do have enough question about it that we should have answers. So I was asked this time in a room that there was probably 30 people in, and I said, let me ask you, if I were to hand out a piece of paper and a pencil to everyone and said, look, our voting system's a mess, write down your idea of a voting system that would maintain voter integrity, that would still allow everybody to get to vote. And we might have 5 or 6 or maybe 20 or maybe 30 different ideas, but every single person could come up with a system that would maintain voter integrity and make sure everybody was only voting once, but that everybody that wanted to vote got a chance to vote.
Better than the way it is right now.
That's my point. So the solution is easy. The solution is easy. I mean, it's easy to come up with a solution to this problem, but we're not. And so then you have to ask yourself, why aren't we coming up with a solution? I think we know the answer to that.
Yeah.
So one of the benefits of the Republicans taking back the House is to be able to look at these questions. No one's even asking those questions because then you're racist, you're xenophobic, you're whatever, you're QAnon, whatever that is. You're
we label you, we isolate you, we separate you, and
as I
we
tell
demonize you.
I tell my kids, as I say on my Facebook page quite a bit when people attack me, the B or other people attack me, I say, look, when people resort to name calling and emotional appeals, facts are not on their side.
Wow.
If they had facts, they would argue facts. If they resort to name calling or emotional appeal, try and drive people emotionally to a conclusion, then facts aren't on their side. And I think that cuts through all the BS. Same is true here. So I think we could look at it, but I think one of the benefits that people don't realize about taking back the House, and they say, well, you can't do anything if you don't take back the Senate. You're still going to have, Biden's still going to have to sign off on bills. That may be true. But number one, we can stop the madness.
Yeah.
We can stop the worst things from happening, number one. And number two is that gives us the ability to look into some of these things like Hunter Biden's laptop, like, January 6th and the due process issues of the folks that are still in custody for that, like the voting irregularities. It gives the House the ability to look into those matters in earnest.
So let me ask you, not ganging up here, but just you've opened a door to a couple of questions, and I want to follow that train of thought down there a little bit. One, when it comes to the last election, presidential election, you've come out and said you didn't like either one of the choices, Trump or Biden. And I think I saw you post that you didn't vote for either one of them. Is that correct?
So I did vote for Trump, but so here's what happened. First of all, you have to remember the times. It was 2016. I was a candidate for Congress. He was a candidate for president. I don't care who you are. It's difficult to be a candidate with Donald Trump on the ticket.
Well, in California for sure.
As a Republican, because every tweet, because a part of my campaign, even though I wasn't tied to him at all, part of my campaign was out of my control. It was in Donald Trump's control because every tweet, every statement, everything that he did, and he was, very grand in that campaign, was immediately brought to me. Well, what do you think about it? I said, well, did you ask Ami Bera? what does Congressman Bera think about it?
Yeah.
But it's easy. So it was challenging. So whichever way you were on Trump, if you're a Republican in that race, it cost you votes. But all that to say, not saying that as an excuse, but providing context. So I was with Donald Trump the entire time. The time I departed from Donald Trump was one thing, and it was a couple weeks before the election, and it was that comment on the bus. I forget the show.
The Apprentice.
No, it was the.
I'm just making things up now.
It was the that evening entertainment show, whatever it was.
Where
they overheard the comment on the bus about
with the Bush guy who interviewed him.
Yes.
And that's as far as we're going to go because neither one of us have any idea what that show is.
Yeah, true. I remember what the statement was, and the difficulty that it posed for me is
we talked about grabbing women,
and you could just grab women when you're famous and all that stuff. Now, do I think that that was just him being self-aggrandizing as an entertainer? Yes, but the difficulty it posed for me is I don't get the luxury of being just a typical politician that can throw rocks, light fires, stand up and pound on the podium, and then go home at the end of the day knowing that nothing I say or do is going to have any meaning or moment.
Sure.
I have to be able to get things done. I have to be able to live in the world I'm advocating for. So I don't just get to everything I have to say and do has to be tempered and measured in that context. This particular statement to me put me in a position where I had to make a decision on whether that, not just the statement, but the conduct was okay. And the reality is, I have 1,500 deputy sheriffs. They take reports for those things that the actions that were talked about. I have victims that report those actual things that actually happen, crimes, sexual assaults, and batteries. And I didn't want to have a chilling effect on either one of those. And so me standing behind Trump after that statement.
Well, and even more than that, you have a daughter. I think you said you have a daughter.
I had 2 daughters.
You have 2 daughters.
And they were both teenagers at that time.
And I have 2 daughters. And I tell them, I told them even when it came out, my job, I will never make excuses for what somebody said that's inappropriate or action somebody does that's inappropriate. And that's not
So that was the issue. I mean, I could stomach all the stand. Obviously I wish he'd be more tempered in his comments, certainly after he became president. But once he got into office and started doing things that I cared very much about, working on border security, he truly honored law enforcement and public safety and first responders like presidents haven't before or since.
Did you feel he honored him? And because I know one of your comments that you've come out, and again, all I know is what I've seen or what I've seen you post. I don't have any other third party.
Well, that's an interesting point, because and I would say that, and I say this all the time, if people want to get a sense for who I am, I've never taken anything off my Facebook. So you can go back years and look at, obviously, before I ever contemplated running for Congress, the first time or the second time, and you can get a feel for who I am. Now, obviously, a lot of stuff right now is put on by my team. Yeah. But before I announced my
But I think it's good to be able to ask the question so you can give context. So, man, 10 questions went through my head at one time, and I can only handle one at a time. But, because I'm really intrigued by it. And obviously, I say all of this with honor and very much appreciation of everything you've done. But just asking questions but you did come out, I think I remember saying you did feel he violated, because you're talking he did a lot for law enforcement. But then you did come out and say, as somebody who's for law enforcement, that what he did in January with the riots on our nation's capital, you don't appreciate, and you felt like he attributed to some of those actions.
I don't know what post you're talking about.
I don't know either.
I've always been, and I obviously get asked that a lot, and about January 6th.
Why don't you just, let's just pretend there's not a post.
Absolutely.
And talk about your thoughts on that.
I don't know that I've ever opined about Donald Trump's involvement or contributing to what occurred or anything like that. But I have been asked a lot, and I'm happy to talk about January 6th. I always say, well, what do you think about those January 6th, the insurrectionists, the rioters?
Well, did you feel what Trump did encouraged the insurrection?
There were 3 things that day, right? Okay. There was a presidential speech, there was a protest, and then there was a riot. Yeah. So, for example, we had a couple of employees that were at the presidential speech. That's all they were at. So that, the B tried to make a big deal that they were somehow insurrectionists, and they ended up in the Capitol, but nothing was further from the truth. So the protest, the presidential speech, I thought were fine. The riot at the Capitol and the entrance, that was not fine. The assaults that occurred, the breaking the barricades, the trespassing, all of those things were not fine. I'm a law and order guy. In some respects, I'm a simple guy. I'm a law and order guy. And so those people, do I feel like they should be held accountable, or should they be pardoned? No, they shouldn't be pardoned. They should be held accountable for the crimes they committed. Only for the crimes they committed, but they should be held accountable for the crimes they committed.
Given the due process, where some of these guys are being locked up.
That's the other thing. Yeah. I'm a big fan of law and order, but I'm also a big fan of due process. I've spent 33 years of my life defending constitutional principles of due process. And what I've seen since then does not seem to be, it seems to be disparate treatment among these folks.
Cherry picking who they want to.
Cherry picking who, keeping them in solitary for the length of time they were in, holding them without bail, not allowing them, folks with no criminal histories that are, ultimately guilty of misdemeanors in most cases, being held without bail so they can't continue their livelihoods or be with their families for this length of time. I am looking very much forward to becoming more knowledgeable, becoming an insider instead of an outsider looking in, being an insider looking into what that is. And again, that is something that I can bring to bear on that. I understand principles of due process and the Fourth Amendment and constitutional principles, and that is something I'm going to bring there to use some of that expertise and experience to see what can be done about some of the due process concerns that I have as one person that a lot of people share.
I think it's really tough being in the position you're at, because you're very public, very transparent, but there's so much you've had to deal with that people can find a lot of things to try to poke holes in.
It's easy to be a critic.
Well, and that's not what I want to do, because I think you said it very best at the very beginning. You said it well at the very beginning. We have two great candidates before us. I think there's people who have a lot of questions out there, and they do, from border control to taxes. I think you have a lot in, dealing with law and order, dealing with border control. But I think then there's different questions. I think you've done well because you've handled big budgets. So, taxes, being able to continue to represent different avenues of people. The thing I love is Sac County is extremely diverse. Mm-hmm. You've been elected multiple times in an extremely diverse county, represented by a lot of different people. People, some say, wouldn't be as pro law and order, and yet they still found you to be the candidate that they wanted to support. So I think, it's really exciting to see what you can bring to it. What do you think were the most difficult things that you have to overcome as you want to step into this role?
That's easy. For 12 years, I've been a committee of one. And now going back there to be a committee of 435, I think that will be challenging for me. In fact, that was one of my concerns I brought to Doug Lamalfa in the beginning when he was trying to encourage me to run. And I said, and I know Doug, and I said, Doug, I'm going to ask you a question. I need you to be honest with me. And this was back when I was considering it, kind of about the same time as that Reno trip. And I said, look, I'm not trying to make a career out of Congress. I'm trying to bring my career to Congress, my experience. I'm trying to get things done. Look, I've never had the luxury of being the critic or being the guy throwing the rocks or lighting the fires. I've always had to be the one getting things done. So that means compromise. That means bringing stakeholders together. It means all the things that getting things done requires. I said, so I'm going there to get stuff done. I don't want to go there and have leadership tell me, sit down, freshman congressman, just have a cup of coffee for about 6-8 years and then come and talk to us when you have a little bit more season. I said, I'm not trying to change the system, but if that's the way it's going to be, that's fine. I don't need it. I will do something else. I will find some other way to take my passion and experience to try and make a difference in the areas that I want to make a difference in. I said, so I need you to be honest with me. Are they going to listen to me?
Yeah.
And if not, that's fine. No harm, no foul. And he said, he was honest and said, look, they're not going to listen to you on everything, which I said, that was actually reassuring to me. I mean, oddly, that's reassuring because I know he's being honest. And he said, but the piece about how national policy affects the micro of law enforcement on the street, people's public safety at the micro level, we don't have that. We don't have that voice. He said, so you would absolutely be relied upon for the issues in which you have experience that at the local level that we just don't have, that's a missing piece for us. And so that didn't, put me over that didn't weigh the balance scale in favor of me running that time. But that was a big question I had to overcome in my own mind before I decided to run. So, all that to say that I think that will be a challenge to me. I've already got some ideas, I think, how to bridge the divide between Democrats and Republicans back there. I think I can do that.
You just come and say, I'm Sheriff Scott Jones.
Exactly. There's only 2 sheriffs currently in Congress that were prior sheriffs.
Really?
You'd think there are more. I mean, sheriffs are politically popular in their jurisdictions, and you would think that they have some stuff to bring, but there's only 2. There's been more in the past, but there's 2 currently.
Okay, so if you, let's say, for whatever reason, you don't get it, what do you do?
Well, I try and bring my golf handicap down from 13 to about maybe a 7. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, and I honestly don't. A lot of people. I will still do something to answer your question succinctly. I'll do something. I don't know what. And I've not really looked because I've not really allowed I know opportunities will come up for me that I can't possibly anticipate as I sit here. So even though I'm a planner, I'm a type A guy, and I want to know what my next step is, intellectually I know that whatever is going to come my way, I can't anticipate now. So I try and not to think about it. I really don't. And so I just I want to be flexible. I'll do something. I still have a couple of kids in high school, and
sure,
I'm only 54, so I've got plenty of time to do something.
Stop this senior PGA nonsense. Come on.
I think the senior tour is like over 50 though, right? I mean,
I don't know.
So
the worst golfer you've
right
ever
now,
seen.
The top of my list, a ticket taker at Regal Theater, because I think I can do that. Free popcorn, free movies. That's at the top of my list right now. But I suspect there'll be something. If Congress is not meant for me, then I will figure out some other way to serve. And I don't know what that means. I have no idea. But I'm sure something will come up. I figure I'll have some opportunities. And no, I will not be doing a radio talk show.
Sitting next to John McGinnis, you two just
it'd be fun to fill in
bantering.
for him, but
Yeah.
I can't sling it like John.
It's good stuff. Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed getting to know Sheriff Scott Jones just a little bit more, answered a couple of your questions. And you know what? I love you getting informed. So share this. Like I said, subscribe to the page, like it. But then you know what else you need to do? Go and watch some of the other videos. Get informed on who's running, who they are. I think knowledge is so important. And one of the things we realize is we did not know. I want you to know. I want you to get informed. Then continue to go out there and be awesome. You guys know how this goes. Until we drink together again, cheers.